Cool. Well, dude, I really want to talk about, with you is building, family culture and somebody who's really dedicated their life to, being the dad's edge, I guess you will. But real quick, first of all, Larry is an amazing human being. If you're not subscribed, if you're a father and you're not subscribed to the Dad's Edge podcast, there's the plug, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that. But I really, really I cannot tell you this guy is doing enough, good work in the world. And interesting, I came on your podcast and we were rapping, and I think we talked for like over an hour, and then right at the end, we start talking about the Squire program, and we were both going there like the next week or something like that.
That's right, man. Isn't that crazy?
We didn't even know. We just
didn't.
Yeah, we just happened to show up or we found out on the podcast, but then a week later we were together in January, for the I think it was the one I took my nephew to, and it was an amazing experience, wasn't
it? It was like no other. That was a year and a half ago, like you're saying, and then yeah, we still refer back to that.
Yeah.
For life lessons. I actually had to refer back to it this morning. I had a bit of a tough love, come to Jesus conversation with my two older boys on a few topics, and
Yeah.
the Squire came up, and I love referring back to that. And it's interesting too, because when I refer back to the Squire and pull in those life lessons, I immediately see Ethan, my oldest, who you met, just completely engage in the conversation.
Yeah.
Or I think it's so important too, and I'll just say this quickly because I know we want to get on to other things, but I think it's so important that not only fathers, right, are a guide and a leader, for and let's just talk about sons right now. Daughters, of course, sure too, but sons. I think it's really important that dads have a good tribe to surround not only themselves with, but their sons. So like, for instance, depending on the topic, right, I'll pull out some of the coaches from that experience. So like if I know it's something is not landing necessarily with my son, like maybe it's sort of landing halfway, and I'll do this. I'll be like, what would Coach Steve say to you right now?
Yeah.
And immediately, he's like, he would tell me zero excuses. I'm like, so what do you think? And he's like, all right, yeah, zero excuses. So yeah, it's cool, man.
Yeah, it is powerful because, again, you are who you surround yourself with, right? So if you're on the weekend sitting around a bunch of fat guys drinking Bud Light, specifically Bud Light, that's going to be a problem, right? But if you surround yourself guys like each other, Ray, Steve, your different coaches, or my different coaches, it changes that dynamic and it changes the conversation. It changes what's allowed and what's acceptable, and it affects down to your kids. So just getting into this real quick. We really want to talk about leadership, family culture, and then growth with you specifically, because I feel like you just went all in on that. I feel like being a dad, that's been your thing. So can you quickly tell us, like, how did the Dad Edge come about? Like, where were you at in life, and then where you quit your day job and you just went all in on, leading men and leading men in the household?
Yeah, so I mean, Dad Edge really started with probably my childhood, to be honest. I'll just give you a 30,000-foot view.
Yeah.
I grew up with a variety of father figures that were very toxic. My mom was married 3 times, dated several men between each marriage, and it was a revolving door of the same guy, just different name, different face, heavy drinker, partier, abuser, like just your typical like nightmare, right? She was married to my biological father for, I think, 4 years. They got divorced when I was 9 months old. He was gone. I ran into him when I was 12 by accident, which is kind of crazy. I'll give more detail, but I don't think that's a topic for this interview. But we had this like 6-month relationship. It just kind of happened sort of quickly. He was remarried at the time, 2-year-old son, another one on the way. We hung out for about 6 months. After about 6 months, we had a conversation. He was like, hey, Like I kind of like I just can't do this right now. It's too very complicated for him. So gone again. Ran into him as a total fluke when I was 30 in a Starbucks. 18 years later, he was coming in to get his morning coffee. I was there for a meeting, and 17 years later, here we are. Me and he and I have a relationship. He's still married to the same woman. I have two younger half brothers. We have a decent relationship. But I'll tell you that experience growing up with all these crazy father figures, that experience with my own father, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a good father.
Yeah.
Like I'm highly motivated to do that. But what I can tell you, and you know about this as well, just because you're highly motivated to do it, that doesn't mean you're equipped to do it.
Right.
Right. So I was falling on my face quite a bit. I wasn't abusing my kids. I wasn't getting drunk and throwing beer bottles at them or anything like that. But I really wasn't engaged as I am now.
I was gonna
Right.
say
And
you weren't showing up.
no, it was
Yeah.
like doing it from like out here. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is my 15-year-old, when he was 4, Dad Edge got started with a really dark moment. I always told myself I'm never going to hit my kids out of anger.
Mhm.
I'm just not going to do that. I'm not here to argue whether spanking is good or bad. I just didn't want to do it. And I spanked him when he was 4. He stepped out of line. I did it in a moment's reaction. I spanked him, and unfortunately, I hit him hard, and he hit the ground.
Mhm.
And that was the first and last time I put my hands on my kids like that. And when I went to pick him up, because I was like, oh my God, like what did I just do?
Yeah.
And he looked at me like he was terrified of me. And that I was so impacted by that moment that I was like, man, that's it. This is it. Like I'm gonna learn this, and I'm gonna do it well. I'm sick and tired of being frustrated without a map and without knowing what to do. So I started to learn. And to be honest, that was, 11 years ago. The learning hasn't stopped. And
Yeah.
that's what we continue to do within Dad Edge is it's a learning platform of this stuff.
Isn't it amazing that it doesn't? There's no peak to it. There's no
Mm-mm.
point of arrival when it comes to education and personal growth and becoming a better father, or becoming a better leader. It just goes on forever. It's not something you really. I mean, you get really good at it, but it's not something you ever really master. And I think
Correct.
it's a beautiful thing because you have to open up your mind to the possibility that, oh, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to be a student forever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
So what are your thoughts on the importance of leadership in the family, and what does that role look like to you now versus, when your son was 4?
So I'll quote one of our good friends, Bedros Koulian,
Yeah.
and he came on the podcast and he said a quote that I had heard it before, but it was something when Bedros said it, it really hit me in the heart, and I've been doing it ever. I've always kind of done it, but like it really started becoming my compass, and that is the best lessons are caught, not taught.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very I think when we're talking leadership, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to say, hey, you need to operate in this fashion, right? Or you need to do this way. But if my kids don't see the audio matching the video unless I'm doing it, well, then they're not learning anything, and I have zero credibility as their leader.
Mm-hmm.
So I always look at like, hey, if I need to go have a heart to heart with my boys, like I actually had to do that this morning. Am I operating? Are they seeing me operate within that integrity as well?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, then when I go to talk to them, I have to own that. I have to be
Right.
very aware of that, and I'll communicate that to them. But I think that's one of the biggest missing links is that, men don't know what they don't know. And this is not to down men, right? Because I think if you actually peel back the onion layers with men, just the average guy in general, the average father, the average husband, you really ask like, hey, do you want to be an effective leader in your house? Do you want to have this extraordinary marriage? Do you want to be the go-to guy as a father? They're like, yes. Like with everything in me, I do. And the gap really is, and I'll use you, Nick, as an example with the training that you've been through, right? Like the elite level that you've gotten to in the military. Just because, you might before all that training and before that high rank that you've achieved, you're probably like, yes, I really want to do this. I really want to do this. But the gap might have been like, for me to get there, I have to go through all this training to get there,
Right.
right? To learn these things, to learn how to operate these ways. And I think that's one of the that is the missing link for men, is that like, okay, I want to be this, but where do I go to learn this?
Mhm.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest missing pieces.
And then, so once you're on that, so what I'm hearing is really more about, it's a less about showing and more about doing, less about verbally teaching and leading by example. So it's
Yeah.
hard to,
Leading by example.
so like
Yeah.
to like, talking about your kids and your son is a beast, and um like you've gotten in really phenomenal shape. And how old are you? You're a couple years older than me, or
I'm 47.
47. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at you, you're 47 years old. There's no fucking excuses for any of these other guys. You know what I mean? If you're yelling at your kid to go, play better at a soccer match, right? Or on the wrestling match or whatever they're into, right? And you're the guy that's overweight and you can't even do it. Like, is he really going to listen to you? Are you really leading? Are you
Yeah.
waking up and doing the work early? That's my thing. So when I hear that, it just rings setting the example. And we're going to get into, I want to talk about like spouses being on board in the future, but I was just doing. So I just did a video. I just laid out on the Agoge. I laid out talking about 12 characteristics of effective leaders in the home. Like, if you're going to be a leader, you need to have these, and the point of it was here's 12 characteristics, and I want you to go do a mirror check and then rate yourself. Go look in the mirror and say, where do you live up to these characteristics? So from everything that you do, what are some of the key characteristics that make you an effective leader in the home, or key qualities that make you an effective leader in the home?
So I think the ones that make you a key leader in the home are, number one, you have to lead yourself, right? You have to show that you're disciplined, right? I'll give you an example. Right now, and I don't know if this is going to be indefinite or not, but I am leading 20 other men through a 365-day alcohol-free challenge,
Amazing.
right? And actually,
Awesome.
I'm doing 433 because I'm just going to finish out the year. So we were doing October 25th to October 25th. Reason we did that is because that's when our Dad Edge Summit is, our
Mhm.
live event. And this last year, I stood on stage. I'm like, "Hey guys, I'm doing a year. Who wants to join me?" Had 21 guys step up. I'm going to go ahead and do 433 because that's how many days are left in 2023. So I'm just going to finish out the year. I'm like, if I'm going to go to October 25th, I might as well go to the end of the year. But here's the interesting thing. My two oldest boys, because I have four boys, I have 17, 15, 9, and 7. My two oldest boys, over the past year, like suddenly we went from, I would say, like little league problems, with their circle of friends or circle of people that they,
Mhm.
like, to big boy problems,
Yeah.
like kids getting high in the high school bathrooms, kids drinking alcohol in the stalls of high school where they
Yeah.
go to. They're now, when they all get together, it's not uncommon that vapes are happening, weed is happening, there's alcohol at parties, and suddenly we've gone to big boy problems. Well, my two oldest boys, and knock on wood, um, they don't, they have zero interest in drinking. They have zero interest in vaping and doing drugs. Like, my 15-year-old will tell me, he's like, I ain't doing that stuff. Like, how am I going to perform on the football field, or how am I going to perform in the gym if I got that stuff in me? I ain't doing that. And he will literally, like, if his friend, he had this, I think he lost a friendship over this one.
That's
He
and
had
that's
one of
okay.
his
And
friends.
that's okay.
Yeah, okay. He had one of his buddies outside be like, "Hey man, like, you want to hit on this?" He's like, "Yeah, I do." And he grabbed the vape and he freaking chucked it in the woods. And the guy was like, "What are you doing?" He was like, "Well, what are you doing?" Right now, here's what I'll tell you. I can't sit there and tell my kids, like, "Hey, you shouldn't drink," as I'm throwing back a beer.
Mhm.
Right? You shouldn't be drinking at parties, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, as I'm drinking a beer,
Yeah.
or you shouldn't be vaping as they see me vape.
Yeah.
You shouldn't do weed. And weed where I live now is legal.
Yeah.
If they see me doing that. So, like, I think that that's really important. So I think, again, leading by example, and the tenets. the things that you hold your kids accountable for
Mm.
are the things that you need to be doing, right? So I'll share another example with you as well. One of the things that we live by is you keep your word.
Mhm.
Like you keep your word, right? And you do what you say you're going to do. I had to take my two oldest boys out to breakfast this morning because they're in their last month of school right now, and one of them has some missing assignments, and I had to basically give him some tough love. I was like, and this is what blows my mind, Nick. His teacher in this, and it's in his algebra class, was like, "It's okay, man. Just turn him in before the exam next week." And I'm like, and I told my son, I was like, your teacher might tell you that, but that doesn't fly in our house. Your assignments are tied to your word.
Yeah.
So, like for instance, my son wants to own a business. He wants to own a gym when he's older. I was like, if you promise your members that you're going to have a new squat rack for them on Monday, and they come in Monday, be like, "Hey, man, where's the squat rack at?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I haven't really gotten around to ordering it yet. I'll do it next week when I have time." They're going to look at you and be like, "You said it was going to be here."
Yeah.
And I told them, I was like, these assignments are like that, man. Like the world doesn't work like that. Oh, just turn it in next week. Oh, you didn't pay your mortgage? Just turn it in next week. Oh, you didn't pay the IRS your taxes? Oh, just turn it in next week. We'll be fine. Like there are deadlines for a reason.
And
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 your
and
assignments are tied to your work.
consequences. In life, there's
Right.
consequences. Yeah.
Right. And consequences. So I told them, I was like, you might not get punished at school, but you'll be punished at home. I don't care what your teacher says because the rest of the world doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So, that's another example. So, lead by example. Also, keeping your word is another big one. And I'm happy to give you one more that
Yeah.
we work with as well. Okay. So another one is commitment. And that it's a little bit different than holding your word, right? So like for instance, if my kids commit to something, let's just say the football season, right? Or whatever, track or whatever, wrestling. We went through my kid, my 15-year-old, again, I'll use him as an example. He went out for the wrestling team this year after football, and he was kind of on the fence about it. And he was like, I think I'm going to do it because I think it'll make me more agile for football.
Mm.
Well, the kid he got challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge during wrestling season. He got sick and then he was out for a week, and then he injured injured one of his ribs. He was out for another week. Then he got impetigo. Then he got ringworm. Then all these things, and he was losing some matches. And I could tell it was getting to him. And I could tell like there was a part of him that wanted to quit. But we have just beat this no quit attitude into them ever since they were little. And we're like, if you don't want to, so the message has always been this: finish what you start, no matter what.
Yeah.
Finish what you start, no matter what. So if you're not liking how the season's playing out, or this, that, or the other, you still have to finish it. Like there's no like, hey, I'm waving the white flag. I know it's the middle of wrestling season. It's really, really hard. So I'm out.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like if you don't want to wrestle, don't do it next year, but you finish the season. And the cool thing is that, my 15-year-old in particular, he had all these challenges and he was very quiet, very stoic, but we knew he was frustrated, but he finished. And there was a part of us where like, we know he's tempted to quit, but he didn't. So like committing to whatever it is, finish what you start.
Do you feel like in your house, with the things with the boys with not drinking and not wanting to vape, him throwing the vape or them not quitting, do you think these are all things from you, these conversations or these themes that you discuss kind of regularly in the house that it kind of implants? Are they just stellar performers, or is it because of this repetition of conversation that happens in the home?
That's a great question. I think it's, I will never say, hey, they don't drink because of us. Like all the
Yeah.
great things we've done because of
Yeah.
us. I think these boys are, I think they lead from a good heart, like a good compass
Mm-hmm.
morally, right? Already. So they're pretty simple to work with. I don't know if I don't know what I don't know. So I don't know if that's, we started with that kind of stuff early,
Mm-hmm.
or like, we were always pretty good also about like pointing out the consequences of things like that,
Yeah.
like if you see like somebody out socially And like, so for instance, this one actually really blows my mind. I don't know what it is, but people are now smoking weed before they go work out. Like,
Yeah.
they smoke weed in the parking lot of the gym. Like, I can't even imagine that,
Yeah,
but
I
like,
know.
we'll walk, you know what I mean? So we'll walk past like a car, right? And there's two teenagers in it, or take a guy like in his 20s or 30s.
Yeah.
The car is like beat down, beat to hell. There's crap piled in the back seat. The guy looks like he hasn't showered in like, and I'm also kind of like, wow, this guy's actually in the gym, but he looks like he's homeless, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll point that kind of stuff out. I'm like, hey man, like that dude's smoking weed before he comes in the gym. I was like, what'd you notice? He's like, man, he looks disheveled. Like, he looks
Yeah.
like his car is just a wreck. Like, I was like, does he look like? I mean, I know this is like you're judging a book by its cover, but it's also good conversation piece. I'm like, you think that guy like pays his bills on time? Do you think his kids like trust him if he's got kids, like stuff like that? Like, can you just imagine for a moment that's your life? Like, what
Yeah.
do you think of that? And then it
Yeah.
opens up for a beautiful conversation. Like, yeah, I don't want to, no, I don't want any part of that.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into that kind of thought process, and take the easy road, right? Just relax. Because no one's like in this society, like what is the consequence? What is the consequence from a face value? No, I can have a shitty car. I can have my backseat covered in stuff. It's mine. I can smoke weed. No one's gonna
Yeah.
get you're illegal. No one's gonna get in trouble. But then what's your quality of life?
Right.
You got a dinged up car. You probably broke. And like what they say, how you do one thing is how you do anything, right?
Good all,
And-
yeah.
yeah. So so how have you balanced I hate the word balance because I don't think a balance exists, but I'm purposely using balance, work and family life. Like, how do you do what you do? How do you serve the people you serve? Because I think so many people, especially when they get on the, like you said, like I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna grow. I'm gonna be a good dad, or I'm gonna build a business. Right? I broke away from my corporate job. I'm gonna do it for us. I'm gonna do it for me. I'm gonna do it for my family. It's very easy to fall into the trap of like I'm in the bunker working all the time, answering everything all the time, and then I lose sight of what's most important. The thing that actually my whole reasons why I'm becoming better. So, where are the struggles there, and how have you balanced between the two, between your kids, your wife, your family unit, and providing value to the world and the things that you do in work?
It's such a good question. So I think a lot of it comes to self-awareness of where do we get validation as a man,
Mm-hmm.
and so like for instance, the workplace, right? It's easy for a guy to get validation there. That's part of the reason
Yeah.
why guys will really lean into the validation of work, because that's where we get the the feedback of like if you're doing a good job or not. Are you over delivering or under delivering, right? So it's very easy to measure. When it comes to relationships like your marriage, it's more subjective. It's like I'm not exactly, it's not like I get an annual review with my wife and or like we
Maybe we
rate
should
each other,
maybe
or
we should start that. You sit down and your wife gives
right.
you a counseling. How are you performing as a husband and a
Yeah.
father? Yeah. That'd be brutal, man.
That would be brutal. It's like, so yes, you met expectations here, but not so much here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but hopefully that's not in the bedroom, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you this. So doing the work that I have done with men since 2016, so the past
Yeah.
7 years, we've had over 3,000 men, over the past 7 years. And there's probably more that have come through our program. But one of the exercises that we put men through is they write their eulogy,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's fascinating,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what I'll tell you out of I've heard easily over 1,000 of them at this point, and not in one eulogy have I ever heard, "I'm so glad I spent so much time in the office and I
Right.
made all this money." Like,
Right.
literally. But yet that's, so it's funny to really step back and zoom out from eulogies, because 95%, of our, and I'm making that statistic up. I have no idea. Just
Yeah.
just call it like the majority of our daily activity really doesn't have a whole lot to do with what we value at the end of our life.
Right.
So, I keep that in front of mind. So like, how do I do it? I, I, I'm one of those people that when it comes to my boundaries, I'm pretty darn disciplined. So like, for instance, I know, like, so for instance, from 9 a.m. Central to 10 a.m. Central, my attention is 1,000% with you, right? I don't have things going on in the background. I'm not checking social media.
Yeah.
It is right here and the now,
Yeah.
right? And I think in this day and age, it's easy for us to get, the shiny thing, our phones or this or that. Like everything's immediate gratification, but you've got to be dialed into the moment. When my kids are at home, we've got this product that we partnered with called Aro, which is ARO. It's basically a box, a container,
Mhm.
and you put your phones in it, and and it's got an app, and it measures your time away from your device. Like not just like people are like, oh yeah, I'll put my phone down. Well, this actually it's out of sight, out of mind, and there's an app actually measuring the amount of time you do not have this device on you. It's really fascinating. Even if your phone is in your pocket and you feel a buzz, it's going to take your attention away
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
whatever it is that's in
Yeah.
front of you. Because you're like, oh, who's that? What is that? So I use that quite a bit because it's a discipline. So, and I use my calendar, another big one. So like for instance, like tonight, I actually put in my calendar that I'm going to be fishing with my 9 and 7-year-old in my calendar.
Mhm.
So like I heard a quote a long time ago, show me your calendar and I'll tell you what's important to you.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really important to be in the present moment when you can. And a lot of people, they'll say this all the time. I want more time. We're not going to make more time because
Right.
we all have the same 24 hours in the day. It's how do you create the intentional time with the time that you have, right? Because just because you have more of it, that doesn't mean it's going to be better. So, how can you be diligent about being 100% there,
Mhm.
intentional, and present when the time is there,
Yeah.
right? Versus like, I mean, and you see it all the time. Like, I'll actually, when I take my two younger boys, my 7 and 9-year-old to soccer practice, I'll leave my phone in the car because I don't want them looking up being like, hey, I saw you on your phone. And to be honest, like I do that discipline because my 9-year-old, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, called me out. He's like, I looked up at you a couple times. You're on your phone. And I'm like, damn. I was like, that's not the impression I want to leave.
Right.
So and I even said out loud the last time we went to soccer, the last few times we went to soccer practice, I was like, see this phone? It's in the glove box. And I'm 100% going to be watching you.
Yeah.
And I look around at all the other parents and all of them, like all of them are on their devices, not even watching their kids. And
Yeah.
I see kids looking up at their parents and like almost like just so eager to be like, hey, did you see what I just did? And they're just like in it. And it's like it's kind of like seeing the Matrix in a way. It's like if you completely detach from that device and you're disciplined with it, it's amazing. It's amazing what you pick up.
Right. So, the biggest one that I see there is boundaries and routine. Like you have
Yeah.
to build a routine, but your routine. So that's what we do with our coaching group is we really sit down and go, okay, what are your top 4 priorities in life? Now let me see your routine. And I'm like, well, either you're you're lying about one, you're lying about your priorities, or you're lying about your routine. Which is it? And the reality is they're not lying. They're just not living congruently with what their priorities are, right? And
Right.
so what we do is, and I imagine you and I follow a very similar pattern. My routine dictates like they're congruent with each other. So everything that I need to do, right? I run off that calendar. Like you said, like right now we're in this podcast. I'm 100% in this podcast. As soon as this podcast is over, I go into the next thing and I'm 100% in there and then, so on. But then when the time hits, it's like, nope, now it's, it says that we're going on a walk on the beach. We're going, you know what I mean? We're going to the fish market. We're doing dinner. You know what I mean? Like everything is so, and that can be kind of robotic, but holy cow, everything in your day when you do it and you follow that kind of cyborg mentality, it's just so rewarding. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to be tired. Like you're going to be exhausted at the end of the day. It's because you showed up all day. From the time you woke up to the time you go to bed, you were showing up, and nothing that you didn't have a return of investment. So that's the reason why I don't like the word balance, because you're not balancing the two. Everything is your life. I feel like people get messed up to where they realize, oh, this is my work life and this is my personal life. Well, let me break your life down in decades and hours and see where you're actually spending what's your life and what's your work life. You're going to be real sad when you see the breakdown between 20 years old to 50 something years old. You know what I mean? So
I agree.
It's all just one thing, man. It's all one thing.
Yeah.
It's your life, and when you get a blip of it, especially for us that have kids, I mean, I feel like it just goes so much faster. And if you're not prioritizing the things that are the most important to you and setting those boundaries, then you're really going to be live. And I think this is where the issues come into play, right? Because now, depression and exhaustion and checking out and all these vices that, because you're not living concurrently, the drinking happens, the drugs happen, the pornography happens, all the negatives, the pullaways, because you're looking for something to fill this, lack. If that makes sense.
Makes total sense. The more I think you are not living in congruence with your core values, your moral compass, the things that you truly want, the more you're going to numb and try to comfort and soothe and be more distracted. And you mentioned in there, like devices and porn and all this other stuff. And the thing is that the shame cycle that goes with that is the thing that actually brings us back to those things that soothe us. Like, so if you take porn, for instance, right? And these are conversations I'm having with my teenagers, because of course, like all their buddies are into it. I'm sure they're, tempted by it, or maybe even looking at it themselves. But here's what I tell them. I'm like, be very cautious about this, because it's a trap. Here's what's happening. You look at it, and then it's great in the moment, and then you feel guilt and shame. And now it's because of the guilt and shame that you feel that you want to soothe that guilt and that shame, those feelings that don't feel good, with something that feels good. So you're just going to keep doing, and then you're like, well, I'll just go back to that.
Right.
And then it happens again. And then it's literally, it's like you're looking at it, and because of the shame, you look at it again. Sorry, that's my massive dog. And you keep doing it. It's kind of like the person who binge drinks, at night, and it's like, and then they wake up the next morning and they're like, oh, well, I feel like crap. Take the edge off the hangover is got to bite the dog, right? And take another drink. And then suddenly they're drinking throughout the entire day.
Right.
And then they're like, okay, tonight's going to be the end. And then they wake up the next day and like, oh, I feel like crap. I'll just do it again. So it becomes like this cycle. You got to be willing to break that cycle.
But the beauty thing is when you do break that cycle and you put a different routine into place, you get a different feedback loop. Now you're creating a positive feedback loop to where you're like, oh, I need to do that more. I need to do more of that.
Right.
And that's, it's a hard thing to break, but nonetheless. So, all right, pivoting into like your family and building the concept, like what is your concept of family culture? How do you build a family culture? How have you built a culture within your family?
So, a culture within our family. So I think it's really important that you have alignment with, number one, with your wife, right? On so like my wife and I, we truly view ourselves, and I think probably you and Alison are the same way. We view ourselves as the foundation of this house.
Yeah.
I actually put a video on social media that got a little bit of color to it, right? Some people were like, yes, and then some people were like, this is ridiculous. And this is what I said.
Those are usually the best ones.
Right? But I said, if you are married with kids, you're married first and a parent second. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying like, and this is where I love the keyboard warriors.
Yeah, of course.
And I had one dude be like, so you're telling me that if your wife and kids were in a burning building, you let your kids burn alive?
Oh my God, come on,
yeah,
dude.
That's exactly what I'm saying, man. Come on. And it's just funny, like how people take that to an extreme. What I'm saying is that, the kids are like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction underneath our relationship. They're extremely important.
Of
right?
course.
They're a huge priority. But I will say this, I will not put your mom on the back burner for the sake of I'm a dad now or
Mhm.
I'm a parent, so my kids come first and my wife is just going to have to take whatever's left over.
Yeah.
I don't buy into that at all. So our culture is like Jessica and I, one of the things that we got aligned with quite a few years ago was number one, what are our individual core values?
Mhm.
Yeah, everybody operates within 5 to 7 core values, right?
Right.
And the way it usually shows up is, I don't know what it is about this situation or whatever it is, just doesn't feel right to me, or this
Right.
feels really right, one of the two.
Right.
So we went through that. I identified mine, she identified hers, and then we came together and we're like, hey, what are your 5 to 7? And then we came together and we're like, oh my gosh, like look at this. And then we meshed the two of them together. So, like for instance, the culture of our family is one of the thing is we value deep human connection
Mhm.
within our family, and we will do whatever it takes to have deep human connection. So, like for instance, one of you talk about routine, right? Um, I take my kids to school every day. You know, we talk about their day, we pray. You know, we do things like this that bring us together. We eat dinner, even though it sounds almost impossible. Sometimes I'm like, I can't even believe we pull this off every single week. We eat dinner together as a family, despite 4 kids in activities, high school, you know, elementary school, soccer and baseball and all this other stuff. We will eat dinner together come hell or high water almost every single night as a family. And we
That's a
talk.
lot of effort.
It's a ton of effort,
Yeah.
but and here's a culture. Here's a culture shift, right? Every single Sunday, you talk about routine. My wife and I look at our calendar Monday through Saturday. What do we have on the docket?
Mhm.
Who's doing what? You know, who's the one making dinner? Who's the one toting the kids to hear this or that? Who's the one, you know, who's responsible for cleaning up? The kids are involved in this and the whole 9 yards, right? I mean, like, hey, this is your role on Tuesday and Thursday. Here's my role. Here's your mom's role. Here's the little's role. Everybody's got their role, right? And we're team. Even on our text messages as because we have a family text message, not my little guys, but my big guys. Our text message thread is called Team Hagner. The culture is we are a team and we do life together. Now, granted, we're their parents and all that stuff, but you know, family dinners, deep conversation. Hey, let's check in on everybody's day. You know, what were the wins? What were the things that freaking sucked, man? What'd you
Yeah.
fail at today?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Things like that. The another culture, I would say characteristic of our family is, and this is, we say it all the time, experiences and memories and adventure over stuff.
Mhm.
Experiences, adventure, and memories over stuff. So, in other words, we make decisions as a family. We run it through the filter of like, is this going to bring us together? Is this alignment with our deep human connection? Like, if we have a decision to make between like, hey, let's go, like, so for instance, this year, um, you know, do we, my wife and I, we've been married 20 years. We decided to do something big, and we decided to go to Hawaii, and we're bringing all 4 boys.
Like, yeah.
And we had to make some financial decisions around that. We're
Yeah.
like, okay, you know, do we do this? Do we do that? Do we this? Do we, you know, do we buy a car that we maybe need? No. The answer to that is no. This is a big year and this is important. So it's experiences, adventure, and memories over stuff. So
Yeah.
that decision became very clear of what we were going to do. Those are that's a few examples of how we operate and the filters that we run decisions through and how we come together.
Excellent. What are the, so now, once you do that, once you do the hard things, you know, I'm imagining, you know, you sit down, you're saying with me, we sit down at the dinner table, there's no devices there. It's deep human connection time, right? There's no distractions. I mean, you're using the box, which I want to know more about. That's
Yeah, we're using
interesting.
the box.
Yeah, you're using they go in the damn box. Everything. It's like sitting down, you know, dinner with the mafia. Like all the phones stay out of the dinner room. Nobody listened to our conversation in here, and I like that too because we do the same thing. We talk about highs and lows. What was your highs? What was your lows? What was your highs for the day? What are the benefits that you've seen when you really create that and then you stick to it? what's the second and third order effects of having that family culture and having those ethics and core values?
So I think for the kids, like, so for instance, I have friends of mine who have kids my age, and I'm sorry, kids our kids' ages, and it's like the kids' friends, and I know that some of their parents, and one individual in particular is having a lot of problems with his son, who is one of my son's ages. I won't mention who or what, but
Yeah.
like, or leave any breadcrumbs. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and my one son doesn't hang out with this kid anymore. But what I've noticed is if those boundaries aren't tight
Mhm.
and they aren't held, like, oh, you know what, like so for instance, we've identified in our family non-negotiables. This is not up for negotiation ever.
Yeah.
Like last night, my one of my boys had his phone at the dinner table, and it was hilarious, man. Like I didn't even have to say a word, and
Everybody
neither did
was
my
like,
wife.
yeah.
All the five other people at the table, just we hadn't even started eating yet, and we just stood there, or we just sat there and we looked at him
Yeah.
while he was on, and he was just like, and we're like, and he's like, I'm really sorry, and like he went and put it away. But there's no fluff in that. It's not
Yeah.
like, oh, you know what, tonight it's okay.
Right.
Tonight it's okay. No worries, man. Hey,
Yeah.
it's okay. No, it's not okay. Like, this is something that we live by, right? So I think making sure that, like, when it comes to our core values, when it comes to our boundaries, when it comes to our routines, like, we're not gonna deviate from that,
Mhm.
like, really ever, because I really think
You're not
that
compromising.
no, we're
Yeah.
not, because I really think that sends a message. It goes back to exactly what you said, Nick, is how you do one thing is how you do everything. Because I think that sends a message to the kids of like, well, if we compromise on this, we can probably compromise on other things
Right.
that we don't normally compromise on, right?
Right.
And the answer to that is no, right?
So how have you, especially because you have boys, I have this thing that, the whole saying, like, you can do things the hard way or the easy way. And I'm always,
Yeah.
with the Agoge and our family and, my message, I'm always like, no, we're doing things the hard way. Like, we do things the hard way. And so how have you instilled the challenges? And I know you and your one of your sons did a bodybuilding competition, trained for it, which was it's just so rad to watch that whole journey, and you guys do that together. The kid's just an absolute beast. And so nonetheless, how have you instilled that it is good to do things that are uncomfortable, to do things that are hard, to do things that you might fail at?
That's a whew, that's a great question. So, number one, you've got to be willing to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you bring up the bodybuilding show, right? So it was actually a year ago this past weekend, as you and I were recording, that we did that show together. And my 15-year-old, who was 14 at the time, actually came to me telling me that he wanted to do that. And so this was like New Year's Eve of 2021.
Yeah.
And so, our show was last year, and he goes, "Hey dad, here's what I want to do this year. I want to do a bodybuilding show, and I want to do it with you." And I was like, well, number one, you can't do bodybuilding show at 14. They don't allow that. He's like, no, they do. I looked it up.
Yeah. Yeah. They
He's
do.
like, there's actually a show in 16 weeks, and there's an age, there's actually a bracket for 13 to 18. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, no, I'm serious. He's like, and I'd like to do it, and I want to do it with you. And that made me really uncomfortable,
Ooh,
really uncomfortable, because I was like
really?
200 pounds, not in show shape whatsoever. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and I'm sitting there, it was like New Year's Eve, I'm drinking, eating chips, and I'm like, that's 16 weeks away, Mason. I was like, I need like 6 months for that. And I kind of laughed about it. And he's like, and I can't remember what quote that he said, but it was literally that. He was like, so you're telling me that you want to stay comfortable? And
Oof.
I was like, whoa, right? Because I I tell him that kind of stuff all the time. I was like, do things that make you uncomfortable, like be
Yeah.
comfortable being uncomfortable. And I was like, challenge accepted. Let's go. Right. And plus he also added in there too, which how do you say no to this? He's like, yeah, we could do this. And we get to work out every day for 16 weeks. And I'm
Oh
like, are you kidding?
yeah.
Sign me up. Like, even if it
Yeah.
was just for that.
Yeah.
And dude, I'll tell you, man, he and I got together and we went out to dinner to celebrate like just the journey of it. Right.
Yeah.
And we talked about like the high point moments and things like that. And I actually kind of like broke down a little bit in front of my son because I asked him, I was like, hey, what were the high point moments for you? And he's 14. He was like, I won second place in both my categories and I won best poser of the whole show. And I'm like, yeah, you did. That was amazing. And he's like, what about for you? And I was like, for me, I did fine at the show too. I got second in two of my categories and fourth in another. And I was shocked. I didn't, to be honest, like I cared, but I didn't. It was like, I wanted to do the show with him.
Yeah.
And I said, Mason, I go, for me, the thing that was so freaking worth it, man, was just the conversations we had in the gym, like
Yeah.
the conversations between the sets, like you spotting me when I'm doing squats and bench and also me spotting you. And like, it created such a bond. Like we will remember this journey until the day we die. And I even told him, I was like, I would have never done it if you hadn't inspired and challenged me and reminded me to get uncomfortable
Yeah.
and to do something that scared me.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of how important that is to do in life. And you reminded me of that. And I think it's really important that when your kids suddenly become the teacher in a life lesson, I think it's actually more powerful to double down and articulate how important and inspiring it is versus like, I'm the one who inspires you and I'm the one that teaches you. When
Yeah.
you can identify this is what you taught me, go and now go teach it to others.
Yeah.
Like that's very empowering for a young man.
Absolutely. And I want to highlight something that you just said there, that your real win from that whole thing wasn't the culmination of the event. It was the journey itself. I think so many people are tied to the results of the journey, and then they tie their self-worth or how they feel about it, or their satisfaction from it. Like, that's not even what it's about. It's the journey.
It's not.
You have to be in love and attached to the process. That's where all the fulfill. If you did everything right, you did everything you were supposed to do, you put all out there, and the results are the results. That's not even what it's about. It's about the journey and what your experience along. That's the time. That's your life. The thing is just the thing. We can't be attached to the results. We have to be attached to walk in the path. So real quick, so he brought this to you. So talking about how did you instill these things? So obviously you did something prior to, like, what the heck? How did you inspire a 14-year-old to do hard things, to do challenges, and to walk into you while you're having a drink on New Year's Eve and be like, yeah, I'm going to rope my dad into this. We're gonna do, and then I'm going to call him out on it.
Yeah. So like one of how we operate in the family, adventure is a big one.
Yeah.
Journey is a big one. I mean, I've climbed, we've done some pretty cool things. Like me and he was 11 at the time. We did a 14er together. That was a big
Nice.
deal for him.
Yeah.
And like, we hiked, it was like a 12-hour thing and he loved it. But I think here's where, again, best lessons are caught, not taught. So years and years ago, I did used to compete. And then I just, 2011 was the last time I ever competed. And I was like, I ain't never doing this crap again.
Yeah.
But I've never been away from fitness. Like I've never actually let myself completely go, but I've always been in the gym. And here's the other thing too, that I think is really important for just your audience to hear, is that I think most parents, I think most men and moms, like they think that their fitness and their family have to be two separate worlds. And I think that's a huge, huge miss. So like, even when my two older boys, my 17, 15-year-old, it was never uncommon for us to do, we used to say crush family workouts on the weekends. So on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, we've been in our garage and the 4 of us would be training while one of them would be in like the bouncer seat, right? And
Right.
we would be
Right.
doing some kettlebell swings. We'd be doing like you're not gonna have like a 9-year-old doing freaking power cleans or anything like
No.
that. But like we'd get out there and we would make it fun. Fitness was part of how we operated. The kids always saw me doing fitness related stuff, which I think, and now I see the 2 of them, my 2 older ones who are like, they're all about it. Like Nick, I never thought I'd say this. My wife and I were like laughing about it. And I told my one son who has missing assignments, I'm like, if you don't get your assignments in, you don't go to the gym for the rest of the week.
Oof.
And he was like, dude, that's so dumb, dad. And I was like, call for what you want. I was like, but you got to get these assignments in. So, and I sat there and I looked at Jessica and I was like, I can't believe I just said that. Like, you can't go to but I think we really instilled with them at a young age that like fitness is fun. We can do it together as a family. And I think because of that,
Yeah.
it's really given our boys a love for the gym. So like even like my little guys right now on Sundays, like they're asking, when can we work out? And so like on Sundays, I'm like, yeah, let's do something fun. They'll write up the workouts and it's like a fun little like 30 jumping jacks and 100 air squats and
Doesn't
30
matter. Yeah.
push-ups. And like
Yeah.
we just do it together and we're high-fiving each other. I think if you make it fun, make it connected, make it memorable, like they find a love for it.
And it just, because you've started it young and you're consistent, it just becomes part of your culture, your core values. Like, this is what we do as a family. And not only that,
Yeah.
but they know the reasons why, and then they get that dopamine spikes, so they're not having to get dopamine from the negative side. They're getting it from the positive side, and then they see the negative as a negative. So
Right.
it's important. But I think it all, like you said, it all goes back to setting the example and the intention. We were the little guy, my third kid, he was in the gym at a week old. A week old, we were back in the gym. Like 1 week, music's pumping, he's in a little thing, and we've just done that. So now he goes to like toddler jiu-jitsu classes twice a week. He's got one today. He's not even 3, and he's doing jiu-jitsu stuff. The real just rolling and mount and side control and things like that. They're just playing games. We go into the gym. It's been so much of his life since the day he can has a thought. He just has his little 1 pound dumbbells, and he just implements whatever we do, and we just create little things. But now it's like, I'm like, Dimitri, what do you want for dinner? He's like, protein. I'm like, good man. And then we do this thing. We're like, okay, ab check. So he pulls up his little shirt and he's like, ab check, looking in the mirror with dad. But you've created this culture that's just what they know. So it really is the opposite message of what the opposition is trying to put into our kids and put into our families. So it sounds, from an outsider, it might sound like super drastic, super crazy to have that kind of culture early on. But it's like, where's the return of investment for what you're trying to tell kids versus what I'm trying to tell my own?
Yeah. What's interesting, if I could just add to that.
Yeah.
I think I think a lot of people have the vision of fitness with family wrong, and especially when the kids are little. Like my 2 older boys, like we go in and we crush the workouts, right?
Yeah.
When they were little guys like Dimitri, or like when Ethan and Mason were like 10 and 8 and that kind of thing, like a lot of people would be like, all right, we're doing push-ups until you puke. Right. That's how you work. That's what working out is all about. Well, of course the kid's going to hate it. Right. They're like,
Right. Right.
why do I want to do this? But the main thing that when the kids were little, right, our main goal was like, are we having fun?
Mhm.
Like, are they laughing? Are they smiling? Are they sweating? Yeah, of course, right? We want to push here. Are we
Yeah.
pushing each other? Are we high
Yeah.
five? So like the foundation of us doing like stuff like this was connection,
Mhm.
was memories, was fun, right? And then I think honestly because of that, because if I would have had these boys like, you will do 50 push-ups or this, right? Then they're going to be like, this blows, right?
Yeah.
So I think when you create that culture of fun when they're little, they do find a love for it. Like they see the good things that are a part of it versus like something. And now they're at the age now where they enjoy being tortured. So,
Right. It
so
turns into something else. It does.
right. But I think at an early age, like if your foundation is connection, as a family, like when it comes to stuff like this, high fives and team and morale,
It kind
that's
of
where I think they
it
find the
kind
love.
of backs up to Wild at Heart, right? Like, what are the words that you're saying? Like, I'll hold him up and he'll do like 4 pull-ups, and I'm like, "You're a freaking beast, man!" And he's like,
Yeah.
So it's that
Yeah.
verbal positive reinforcement that they get. They're like, "You think I'm a beast, Dad?" Like, yeah, I do. I think you're
Yeah.
a wild man. You're amazing. You're an amazing human being. Confidence, self-esteem. You know what I mean? What's that kid going to be like if I continue that for his childhood? What kind of adult is that going to be? What kind of confidence and self-esteem is he going to have to go change his life and build things and create things in his own path?
Yeah.
So I know we got to wrap up, but I wanted to bring one last question, Larry, one last question.
Yeah.
If a father, and this happened, and I know I deal with this in our coaching group, I'm sure you deal with this. A guy goes, you know what, I'm on the path, I'm going to become better, and their wife just isn't on board. I already know the answer, but your point of view, a guy comes onto the dad's edge, and he's just like he's doing better. He believes it. It's in his heart. It's his desire. He has the vision for it. But his wife's just not there. What do you tell him?
Yeah. So just clarifying the question, because I want to make sure I answer it the best way possible.
Yeah.
So she's not on board with his growth, or she's not on board with her own growth?
Let's say her own growth, because he's changing. He's growing, right? Maybe he's getting up earlier. He's doing macros. He's working out. He's trying to serve. He's not there yet. He's Larry 2004, not 2023. You know what I mean? So he's on the path. He has the desire, but he's getting that friction from his spouse, because she's not wanting to change the culture of the family, not wanting to change routine, not wanting to change food. How do we navigate that?
That's a really good question. We've had guys in our community that have gotten because they get really excited about the things that they're learning, and they're evolving,
Yeah.
and they're growing, and they're like, my wife doesn't want to grow. And we're like, that's okay.
Yeah.
That, and by the way, if you start coaching her, she's really going to hate you. Okay.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we, right. Even Gary John Bishop, who wrote the book, Unfuck Yourself and all those other books. Like I've had him on the podcast 4 times. Every time he writes a book, I have him out there, and he was one of our speakers at the summit. He's like, and he's from Scotland. So he's got like this really cool Scottish accent. He's like, what I can tell you guys is don't coach your wives ever. Like, don't ever do it. You can either coach her or have sex with her, but you can't do both.
Can't do both.
So you can't do both. But here's what we always tell guys is like, listen, if your life is improving and you're enjoying life, you're evolving and things are getting better, keep doing it, but don't shove it in your wife's face. Right. Look what I'm doing and you're not. Or like, hey, you should be, don't take a steaming pile of should on your wife either. You should be doing this too. That's going to cause friction. Simply stay in your lane, lead by example, and just allow that example to shine. Right. And
just
and
watch
do it
what happens.
in a way that
And just watch what happens.
Right. Just watch it and be very humble about it. Like, so like, for instance, I've known Jessica for 26 years. I will never coach my wife, right? Hey, you should do this. But what I will do is like, hey, like I'll do something with the kids where I'm displaying a lot of patience in the heat of a moment or whatever. I'd be like, hey, what did you think of that? She'd be like, wow, you were really calm. I was like, yeah, I learned this thing from this podcast guest, and I was doing this, I was doing this. This is what my mentality was going through. And this is what allowed me to stay calm. It was really fascinating. And I was really shocked at how well it worked.
Right.
And that's how I share it. Right. Versus like, this is what I was doing. You should do it too. Right. So that doesn't really go over very well. But I would say stay in your lane, continue to be the shining example. Right. And if you are going to share whatever it is you're learning, share it in a way that is very humble and like how excited you are about your own experience with it without dumping it on her or even shaming her of why she's not doing it. I think that's really important.
Yeah. That's the same exact, what we say is like, just show, don't tell. Just keep showing up, keep telling.
Right.
Anyways, I know you got to run. You got to go change some men's lives. Larry, where do you want people to find you?
So super easy. The Dad Edge everywhere. Instagram, thedadedge.com. Wherever you download podcasts, the Dad Edge. Not hard to find.
Nope.
And my name is it's pretty, I guess, unique. There's not many people under the age of 70 with the name Larry. So if you Google my name, I'll come right up too. So.
Well, dude, I really, really appreciate it. We'll be sharing a lot of these concepts in the thing. I know we weren't able to link up the schedule for the group talk, but I'll definitely take all of what you said. We'll be sharing this podcast with them as well, man. And I cannot thank you enough, guys. Go listen to the Dad Edge. I'm telling you right now, you will benefit greatly from it. He's got some crazy guests on his podcast, as well as he's done. Is the Real Ones out yet? Is all of your other podcasts that are out there?
It's so funny you say that, because I just talked to Bernthal and he told me he knows you pretty well. So my podcast has not been released yet on Real Ones. I think it's coming out later in May. My podcast with Bernthal is coming out, I think, at the end of May. But
okay,
yeah, a lot of the big ones are out.
Excellent.
And then I was on a TV show as well with David Metzler, so that's coming out as well.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, I'm so stoked for your success. Thank you for what you're doing, man. And guys, you know that somebody needs to listen to this. So screenshot this, tag Larry, tag myself, share it on social media. We'll share it out there. Let's change some men's lives. You guys know the deal. Never quit, never surrender, always forward. We'll see you guys in the next episode.